Well, happy Friday, and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for August 29th, 2025, the fifth and final Friday of the month as we head into the big Labor Day weekend, which honestly doesn't feel as celebratory as it usually would based on this week's events. I have so many great Newsmax segments and so much I want to talk about, but so little time. The identities of the two children killed while praying inside Minneapolis' Annunciation Church have been identified as 10-year-old Harper Moisky and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel. We start with Rob Schmitt.
And welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. As the broader media conceals the Minneapolis shooter was trans and kind of acts like they don't know the motive here, a critical revelation from his manifesto that was put online. Robin Westman regretted becoming transgender. The New York Post, translating part of that manifesto, was actually written in Russian. The biological male wrote, "I regret being trans. I wish I was a girl. I just know I cannot achieve that body with the technology we have today. I also can't afford that. I only keep the long hair because it is pretty much my last shred of being trans. I am tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself." So we learn this as we see the first victim of what Westman did. 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel killed. His father spoke today.
Yesterday, a coward decided to take our 8-year-old son Fletcher away from us. Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man he was on the path to becoming. Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
Fletcher's killer, Robin Westman, at 17, tried to turn into a girl. His mother signing off on the paperwork to change his name from Robert. This mass shooting, which left 2 little kids dead, is now part of a growing trend in this country. Trans mass murderers, exposing a pandemic created by the American left and the woke and junk science that they have created to support it. Our most vulnerable are victims to a clear agenda where kids are transitioned and mutilated rather than treated for mental illness and depression. Think about this. Nearly 3 million people in the United States now identify as transgender. They don't agree with the body that they have. A quarter of them are mentally ill children, indoctrinated for mostly political reasons by people who sound like this.
Wish everybody a powerful, impactful, safe, and happy Trans Day of Visibility.
You are exceptional. Please know that you are loved and you are not alone. Trans youth are kids, and they should be able to spend their time being kids.
To parents of transgender children, affirming your child's identity is one of the most powerful things you can do to keep them safe and healthy.
I think being trans is something that's very beautiful and powerful.
We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people.
Idiocy. When the trans issue turned political, we found serious trouble. Democrats looking to create a new victim class turned trans kids, or kids that think they're trans, into political weapons, aligning with the broader trans agenda, which is Marxist in nature, and like any other agenda, wants more members, wants new members, wants young members. Suddenly, Democrats were demanding puberty blockers, hysterectomies, and mastectomies for little kids. They told trans kids anyone denying them these things didn't believe that they had the right to exist. How sick is that? Are we surprised that these mentally ill people are going on shooting sprees after they've been told all this? They've radicalized and enraged mentally ill people largely because it was good for their politics and their political agenda. Trans people are brainwashed to believe that conservatives, that churches, are a threat to their existence. Are we surprised they react in this way? A threat because they don't feed into their mental health disorder by cheering it on, by exacerbating the problem, by mutilating their body. Yeah, they're the bad guys. Robin Westman realized she was the victim of this agenda too late. 60% of trans people have at least one diagnosable mental health condition. I'm sure it's far higher than that. These are things that they don't want you to know.
That's Rob Schmitt, and as far as what we've learned about a motive, this is what police said in yesterday's news conference.
The shooter expressed hate towards almost every group imaginable. The shooter expressed hate towards black people. The shooter expressed hate towards Mexican people. The shooter expressed hate towards Christian people. The shooter expressed hate towards Jewish people. In short, the shooter appeared to hate all of us. The shooter's heart was full of hate. More than anything, the shooter wanted to kill children, defenseless children.
And this is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey.
Anybody that is going to use this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any community has lost touch with a common humanity. I feel oftentimes in these instances there's this desire to villainize a group, regardless of what group or background, gender. You know, the bottom line is that kids got killed.
Nobody is villainizing the trans community. It is the people who've indoctrinated the trans community and trans kids that are the problem, people just like him. Democrats are stoking fear and rage into the mentally ill in our country, and then screaming for gun control when they lash out. All of this is largely done for political gain, again, to create another victim class, while demanding Americans remain intentionally blind to the very obvious danger that they have manifested.
Catch Rob Schmitt tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern. The shooter's hatred and what we have learned about the manifesto was the topic of discussion this morning on Wake Up America.
Minneapolis is grieving after the Annunciation Catholic School shooting, and the usual chorus is calling for more gun control laws. But critics are saying that the killer's own manifestos, well, they point to something else, something darker. Newsmax crime correspondent Jason Matera has this story for us this morning. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Charla. Progressives right out of the gate. Amy Klobuchar, Jacob Frey, members of the legacy media, they're saying skip the thoughts and prayers, go right to passing more gun control laws. But what if the way to stop these school massacres is to take killers at their word? That is to read their writings and see why they choose the target.
How much more explicit can they be than saying they want to go to a place where their victims aren't armed so they can go and kill more people there?
The Crime Prevention Research Center says the why isn't mysterious. Attackers like the Minneapolis trans shooter pick easy targets where they can run up a body count before anyone can fire back.
If the media, even once in a while, would quote these parts of their manifestos and diaries, the entire gun control debate that we have right now would be dramatically different. People would be focusing on getting rid of these gun-free zones.
For instance, according to Lott, the Minneapolis trans shooter wrote in his manifesto that the Aurora movie theater shooter, quote, may have chosen venues that were gun-free zones. I would probably aim the same way, adding that he wanted, quote, to make sure his victims would be unarmed. That's why I and others like schools so much.
I don't know how much clearer these guys can make it. There are literally dozens of similar statements like that over the years, going all the way back to Columbine. And yet the media refuse to go and say why he picked that target based on the fact that he wanted to go to a place where his victims weren't able to defend themselves.
As the do something chorus swells, Lott says that something never includes arming trained teachers and staff, even though he argues it could be the best way to stop an active shooter.
We have over 10,000 schools in the United States that have armed teachers and staff, okay? Many of them have had them for decades. There has not been one attack at any of those schools that allow armed teachers and staff to be able to go and carry where anybody's been wounded or killed during school hours.
Now, Charlotte, for that to happen, the law in Minnesota would have to change because it's currently a felony to possess or carry a firearm on school grounds. And Lott argues that these predators, they see that reality as an invitation to attack. So he's saying, hey, maybe don't go ahead and outlaw the good guy with the gun, especially if you're down 500 police officers since 2020, as is the case in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and having gone to this school, the shooter knew that there was no security outside, no security inside, and he knew, as you said, because this is a zone where there would be no guns, no weapons, that he had free range to do what he did on Wednesday.
Charlotte McBride with Newsmax crime reporter Jason Matera on Wake Up America. The doors of the church were routinely locked, which is likely at least one of the reasons that the shots were fired from outside the church. We've also learned that the Annunciation Church, repeatedly referred to as a soft target this week, right, had asked the state of Minnesota for help, financial help, money through financial grants to beef up security. They were aware of how soft of a target they were, but their request was denied by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. This is Matt Schlapp on the Right Squad last night with his wife, Mercedes Schlapp, former White House Director of Strategic Communications.
How outrageous is this that you have a politician who said no to protecting Catholic school kids, which have a large share of the kids that are being educated in the state of Minnesota, wouldn't provide armed guards for their protection, although he makes those schools and tries to force them to comply with all their woke agenda. Minnesota is a state in which you can get an abortion up until the moment before you would deliver the child. It's a state in which they have mainstreamed and mainlined the idea of getting these drugs to do drug therapy to change the outward appearance of your gender.
Your child's gender.
And now, what a shock that you see a state that would elect Ilhan Omar is a state that just is riddled with violence. I don't think it's an accident that the terrible tragedy around what happened to this country around Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. This is a state that has serious problems, and we seriously considered as a country electing this governor to be our vice president. One final thing. We should care about these people, including this murderer. He's a child of God. Every one of us is a child of God. Up to 45% of trans people literally try to commit suicide.
That's right.
This is a very, very troubling thing that we're putting into people. I understand people are troubled, but we can't give them the easy answer when it's going to make them even more trouble.
And the Democrats are growing the population very deliberately and consciously, a major effort over the course of years to grow the number of people that identify as transgender. And again, 40% at least attempt suicide. Now, you just mentioned the lieutenant governor of the state, too, who was at Peggy Flanagan, who was at an event and wore a black T-shirt with trans endorsing transgenderism. There it is. And look at the giant combat knife across her chest. That is, if I'm not mistaken, a bad representation of the Marine Corps K-bar knife with a blood groove on it, the same kind of knife that was used to massacre the students in Idaho, that she has across her shirt, which is endorsing transgenderism. And these people are sick, and she's got a big smile. She's at a rally pushing this stuff, selling this stuff, and they got teenagers who might be confused about their sexuality, and these people sink their creepy teeth into them, and before you know it, they're taking hormones for the other gender, and then they've lost their minds.
I want to bring this up. The left's hatred for prayer has never been more evident following yesterday's tragedy. Take Jen Psaki, for example, dismissing prayer through crocodile tears on her show last night.
Having your child killed while they are sitting in a pew for a morning prayer service is not what any parent should have to worry about. And I have felt a mixture of anger and a lot of anger and emotional exhaustion about this today, as I'm sure many of you have, because we have been here so many times. And yet again, like clockwork, half of the politicians in our country have little more to offer than thoughts and prayers. That is all they are offering. You're going to start seeing narratives. You're already seeing them. They're already out there about how the shooter was trans. You're going to see narratives about how the shooter appeared to be anti-Trump and anti-Semitic and clearly was in the midst of a mental health crisis. There's no question about that.
All of the above, anti-Trump, and was in the midst of a mental health crisis. And yes, prayer is critical in helping these families heal. Current White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saw Psaki's display, explaining to her predecessor why prayer is so necessary.
Frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith. And I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families themselves who need it right now more than ever.
I mean, Alex, do you think Psaki do they just not get it?
No, I don't think they do. And actually, I thought about that exact point, and I went and looked at polling. I mean, 81% of Americans believe in God. I think it's like 70% identify as Christian. You can pray, and your instinct after what you saw is to pray, but then you can also later talk about what needs to be done. You don't have to harp on those that turn to prayer,
you actually
right?
can do both.
Exactly.
Washington Times journalist Alex Sawyer on the Right Squad with Chris Plant, Mercedes Schlapp, and special guest CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp. Not only was there a White House press briefing, but border czar Tom Homan also had a little press briefing of his own, speaking with the media outside of the White House, and it is classic Tom Homan.
Gavin Newsom is an embarrassment to the position he holds. Heart stop. If he had an ounce of integrity, he would be calling President Trump and thanking President Trump for making LA safer. He'd be calling the head of ICE and thanking them for the thousands of criminals, public safety threats they've taken off the streets of California. He'd be calling Secretary Noman, thanking her. If he had an ounce, if the data proves it, anybody can look at the data who we've arrested in California. He ought to be thanking us. So Governor Newsom he's an embarrassment to the position he holds, and you know. He's trying to be relevant, apparently, whatever. But we're going to be in LA today. We're going to be in LA tomorrow. We're going to be in every California city. We'll be in San Diego. I was in San Diego, in Seattle, Portland last week, meeting with the men and women at ICE to understand the hate being pushed against them, letting them know that the president has their six. I have their six. They're going to keep doing the job without apology. So Governor Newsom can stand by and watch President Trump make California safe.
Border czar Tom Homan asked about California crime and California Governor Newsom outside of the White House yesterday. Conservative radio host and former California gubernatorial candidate Larry Elder, popular guest on Newsmax, told Bianca De La Garza that Newsom has to focus on Trump because he really has nothing else to focus on.
Gavin Newsom has a lot of problems in his state, but everything he wants to talk about is the fact that it is going to be no more elections. It's going to be President Trump forever and forever. I mean, it is a message that now he is trying to really sell. It seems that he's getting some success on social media trying to mock President Trump. But, you know, the wider picture is 2028 is a long time away.
Well, Bianca, thank you for having me. But really, can you blame him? California has the highest unemployment rate in the country. We have the highest gas prices of all 50 states, including Hawaii. Our home prices are twice that of the national average. Over a period of 3 years, until recently, we've lost about 1 million people in California. So if I were Gavin Newsom, I'd change the subject too and talk about Donald Trump. And what gets me about people like Gavin Newsom, Tim Walz, and the whole cabal of left-wing people that attack Donald Trump, refer to him as a fascist and a Nazi, Bianca. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to prevent a tyranny by a tyrant, by a dictator, by a Nazi, by a fascist. The same people that want more gun control legislation are the very same people calling Donald Trump a fascist, which is exactly the whole point behind the Second Amendment, to prevent somebody like that from taking power. So which is it? Do you really believe he's a fascist? If you really believe he's a fascist, why would you want to take guns out of law-abiding Americans to prevent the very takeover that you claim Donald Trump has engaged in? And regarding more legislation for gun control, we've got everything that you can imagine here in California. What specific law would Gavin Newsom want to see passed in Minnesota that would have prevented this? They've got red flag laws so that if you are somebody who's mentally ill, a loved one can go to court and have firearms removed. Where was his mother? Where were his siblings? And by the way, notice you never hear one single word about a father. I haven't heard anything about a father. And finally, whenever I hear this talk about gun control legislation, never do you hear how often Americans use guns every single year to defend themselves, but for they might have very well been dead. Barack Obama ordered the CDC to do
and they're
some
mad
research
people
on
are praying.
Yeah, Barack Obama ordered the CDC to do research on existing defensive uses of guns, and they found at least one defensive use for every time a gun was used to take a life. So people like that never look at the other side.
Let me get in some other topics here. All right, let me jump in. I mean, you know what they didn't get, unfortunately, when you talk about Tim Cabal at the Cabal and Tim Walz, they actually begged for help. This school was a Catholic school. 2 years ago, they sent a letter to Governor Walz, and they said, it was April 2023. It was after the shooting at a Catholic school in Tennessee. And they said, school safety in non-public schools, we need this grant money. They said it was urgent. $50 million was there, never appropriated. So this school could have been more secure if Tim Walz has stepped in. But you know what he did yesterday? He stepped in front of the cameras because he wanted to get his moment. There's a letter right there. They were asking for assistance, and it never came, Larry.
Yeah. How about hardening the target? How about making it more difficult for a bad guy like that to do what he did? Now, I know these are two different countries, but in Israel, you don't have shootings like that at schools because they've hardened the targets. They've given teachers the right to defend themselves, to have firearms, something that the left won't even discuss here in America.
Radio host and California resident Larry Elder on Newsmax. Yesterday, I mentioned the Parkland school shooting, right? The state of Florida, where I live and where my kids grew up, already had some pretty strict security measures in place for most school districts. Then, like the aftermath of a lot of tragedies, things changed even more after the Parkland school shooting. The state now mandates that every public school facility, whether they like it or not, have at least one armed school officer or an SRO, a school resource officer. High schools usually have several. Some high schools, including the one that my kids went to, have police departments inside the school, or they have like an auxiliary office like out in the parking lot, like a trailer or something. And I can tell you it's unnerving to see your kids go through metal detectors to go to school, right? But it's also reassuring at the same time. Florida even has a program called the Guardian Program that allows for school districts to arm certain school personnel, like a teacher or a counselor, if they meet the state requirements. Vice President Vance was on the road yesterday. I'm going to play some of that for you. But while we are in Florida, it looks like the Alligator Alcatraz Detention Center will be closing soon. Last week, I told you a federal judge, an Obama appointee, ordered the Trump administration and the state of Florida to close the illegal immigrant detention center and processing facility after multiple lawsuits were filed by environmental groups and a Native American tribe, the Miccosukee Indians. Governor DeSantis said that Alligator Alcatraz has been so effective, it was not going to be needed that much longer anyway, since all of the detainees were being deported.
The deportations are continuing. DHS is taking people out of there, and they're moving them out.
The governor also said that the state is opening a new immigration detention facility in Jacksonville, Florida. The Everglades, as you know, are not only full of alligators, but they are also full of pythons, which is an actual environmental issue, a huge issue. You may have seen or heard about over the years the python hunts, etc. Now the state's conservation experts are using robot rabbits that actually heat up and move around like real rabbits to help bring the pythons out of their hiding spots so then they could be captured. Robot rabbits. But are they made in America? Here is Vice President J.D. Vance speaking about manufacturing in Wisconsin.
And I guess we've got the senior class from Luther High School. Where are all the Luther High School students? Where are you all at? Thank you all. Now, have you all started school yet, or are you playing hooky today? You have? Okay, good. Well, I'm glad the vice president coming to town got you guys out of school a little bit. But let's talk about the future, because these kids are the future. We want to make sure that they have a prosperous American future to grow up in. And let me take you back a little bit to where I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, southwestern Ohio, where my papaw, and the reason I love the welders in particular, is my papaw for 42 years was a union welder at a place called Armco Steel. And when I was growing up, Armco Steel had shed about 80% of the workforce that it had employed when my papaw was working there during its heyday. And unfortunately, it was one of the lucky ones, because a lot of the steel mills lost about 80% of their workforce. A lot of the steel mills didn't exist at all. And I think that what happened is that for those of us who grew up in those factory towns, we were so used to seeing those proud, big, beautiful factories, seeing the night sky lit up with that furnace. We were proud of what our parents and our grandparents made every single day. And of course, they were proud to earn the kind of a job that enabled them to provide us a good life. And what happened? Thanks to a generation of failed politicians and stupid decisions, those factories closed down one by one by one. And many of those proud towns that made us who we are, ladies and gentlemen, those proud towns became ghost towns. Well, not anymore. What the President of the United States was elected on a promise to do was to bring back American manufacturing, to bring back American craftsmanship, and that is exactly what President Donald Trump is doing every single day in Washington. How nice is it to have a president who, instead of rewarding companies for shipping your jobs overseas, rewards companies for building factories right here in the United States of America? How nice is it to have a president of the United States who, instead of raising your taxes, is cutting your taxes by historic margins every single day, as we just did? For years, American leaders would ask you to work overtime, would ask you to spend even more time away from your family, and every hour that you spent at the job, they would reach further and further into your pocket. How nice is it to have a president of the United States who cut taxes on overtime, because we believe that if you spend an extra hour at work, the government ought to keep its hands the hell out of your pocket. Is that right?
Vice President Vance in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And in other headlines, the White House announcing an $825 million arms sale to Ukraine. They're buying our weapons now, basically with the money that we gave them, but at least we're getting some of the money back. And the Pentagon's DOGE team is now looking over thousands of government contracts in hopes of cutting wasteful spending at the Pentagon. And big news from Texas, because everything's bigger in Texas, right? Former Texas Rangers great Mark Teixeira announcing that he's running for Congress to fill the Republican seat of Representative Chip Roy, who is going to be running for the state's attorney general. Someone, please get me a Teixeira for Congress t-shirt. Teixeira saying he's a lifelong conservative as he made the announcement on X. And this is also good news. The Air Force has extended full military funeral honors to Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and killed by a police officer during the riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Air Force leadership of the Biden administration denied the request in 2021. The current Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Troy Mink, was appointed by President Trump back in January. This decision also comes on the heels of a $5 million wrongful death settlement that was reached for Babbitt's family back in July. And this is something I've been trying to get to all week in Charlotte, North Carolina, a beautiful city that I briefly lived in. The big story there all week has been the murder of a beautiful 23-year-old woman on a train. She was stabbed to death for no reason whatsoever other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Killed by a homeless man with a long criminal record, a guy who has been in and out of prison and been on the police radar. 23-year-old Irina Zarutsky turns out was a Ukrainian refugee who fled the war in Ukraine for America. Charlotte has a big Ukrainian population, so she left Ukraine for the war only to be killed in America. Charlotte's longtime Democrat Mayor Vi Lyles, who, by the way, refused my interview requests when I was working there, on a conservative news talk station, WBT, because I'm sure they're all over this story. The mayor spoke all about the suspect and the city's homeless crisis and mental health, and essentially said nothing about the victim other than she was praying for the victim's family. Charlotte, another high-crime blue city in a red state. On Wall Street, stocks opened in the red this morning after the S&P hit another all-time high, new high yesterday. The markets will be closed on Monday for the Labor Day holiday, and hopefully you have the day off as well. And be sure to keep up with the news today and all weekend on Newsmax N2 and at Newsmax.com. Also, make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus so you get every show with all your favorite hosts and all of the fantastic expert analysis. The news starts each and every morning at 6 Eastern with Alex Kramer, Wake Up America early, followed by Wake Up America, then National Report Newsline at noon, straight through Rob Schmitt, Finnerty, Greg Kelly, The Right Squad, as well as the Wake Up America Weekend Edition, Saturday and Sunday Report, Sunday Agenda, documentary, special programming, and more. I'm Tony Marino. Have a fantastic weekend. Maybe you have some special plans for the big weekend. Be safe and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.